Welcome to Unit 6. This is a brief introduction to our unit on process capabilities and an explanation of your assignment for this week. Last week we talked about population health and got an overview of the capabilities needed to care for a population. We explored how analytics will be needed to stratify the population based on risk, chronic conditions, and other variables so that the appropriate interventions can be applied. We also discussed the many technologies available, with more coming every day, to help us automate basic tasks to enable us to care for these populations. This week we will build on that and look in more detail at process capabilities, the processes that are involved in providing accountable care. We will explore processes needed to provide coordinated care across the care continuum, and this means coordinating care across the ambulatory environment through acute, inpatient, and on to post-acute, either in a nursing home situation, rehab, or the home environment. As we will see in the case studies this week, the care continuum also extends beyond any one organization. Although we still have some people talking about patient-centered medical homes, we all know that consumers are making their own choices to get care from many different providers. They're not committed to getting their care from any one particular place. So the care continuum actually is what the patient or consumer chooses. This leads to very complex processes. The case studies will also highlight how analytics is an important tool for examining and improving processes. So, for example, first, can we look at opportunities to automate steps in the processes? This could speed things up and reduce errors. 2, can we look for opportunities to standardize processes? This includes work such as building standard order sets or clinical protocols in an EMR. 3, we can look at transition points in the process, places where patients move from one part of the continuum to another, and see where we're falling short in these transitions. Some good examples of this are looking at things like discharge instructions, patient follow-up after a procedure, and medication reconciliation. And 4, we can even look at outcomes to identify opportunities to improve processes. And these can lead to interventions such as things like hospitals arranging for Uber transportation because patients cannot afford to come back for follow-up appointments. The key thing to keep in mind is that transitions of care are points where handoffs comes into play and the patient is moving from one setting to another. This is very likely to be a point where we lose track of things like medications or appointments, and they can easily fall through the cracks. This leads to potential errors and problems around patient safety and outcomes. Transitions of care points are where we're at risk for introducing errors or variation into the process, and this can negatively impact care and results. So it's really important for us to begin taking a look at processes. Ultimately, this also leads to problems with rising costs. So if a patient doesn't understand their discharge instructions and ends up being readmitted to the hospital, this has cost implications as well. At this point in the course, I'm sure you're seeing there are a lot of moving pieces, and it is important to understand how they all fit together if you're going to take a strategic approach to using analytics in healthcare. We've seen that a tool that can help to develop a strategic analytic plan are healthcare analytic adoption models, and we discussed those in Unit 3. In those models, you can see that population health and care coordination appear higher, somewhere around level 5. These models can help us to see how these pieces fit together and how they build on one another into an overall strategic approach. So some questions this week for us to think about in terms of application of analytics to processes. First of all, how do business intelligence and analytics impact care coordination and healthcare processes? Secondly, how do you measure healthcare processes? So for IT, we're not limited to simply looking at the functionality used in a system, such as did the patient log on to the portal or not. Beyond that, beyond functionality, how do you measure process? And three, how can analytics help us to improve these processes of care? So how does analytics impact? How do you measure it? And how do analytics help improve healthcare processes? In addition to the adoption models we saw in Unit 3, we've already looked at process measurement in Unit 2, and that's when we were looking at value-based purchasing scores. Under CMS, hospital value-based purchasing scores, the reimbursement they get depends on having well-designed care processes. Back in 2015, clinical processes of care accounted for 20% of the value-based purchasing score. Now that we're in this unit, it's interesting to look back at that and think about it some more. So I've reposted a slide in your reading so that you can take a look at some of the specific examples of the processes that CMS identified. Now in 2018, CMS is building on their measurement of processes of care to specifically incorporate some measures on the transitions of care. For the assignment this week, we have no chapters to read in the textbooks. Instead, I've provided you with articles and readings related to process capabilities. I want you to start to get a view of how organizations are actually approaching care coordination. There is no one right way to do this. This week, we'll take a break from discussion. We'll focus only on the individual assignment, which is a case study write-up. Please read the instructions for the assignment carefully and note that the assignment is due on Friday at noon, not midnight. I've created a thread on the class discussion board for you, and you can all post in that one discussion thread. This way you can see each other's posts and read through some case studies if you so desire. This week, I suggest you start your readings with the Radley article titled Rising to the Challenge, the Commonwealth Fund Scorecard. This provides you with some background that will help you on the case studies and talks about how they developed a scorecard to look at variation in healthcare across the United States. At the bottom of the page 6 unit in Blackboard, the Unit 6 page in Blackboard, you'll see I've posted the 4 case studies, and each one of these case studies represents the data related to the case study in the scorecard format. So you will pick one of the case studies and base your write-up on that. All of these instructions are also available to you on the Unit 6 page. For the case study write-up, please use the outline for organizing your information. It's posted in Blackboard, and it goes through what the case is about, why, and then finally how. So in general, we want you to take those 3, go in that order for presenting your information and your analysis. Again, take a close look at the rubrics to understand how we're really going to be grading your assignment. So, as always, we are available for your questions, and have a good week.